Hey, welcome to my first briefing, and what I'm going to cover with you today is this. When pressure hits, leadership needs a system. And I want to talk through this like a real conversation, because this is not one of those clean leadership ideas where everything sounds good on paper, then falls apart the second the day gets ugly. This is about the ugly part. This is about the moment where the customer is already irritated, the team is already looking at you, the numbers are not right, the shift is behind. Somebody called out, somebody else left work unfinished. The handoff was weak. The message from above is not fully clear, but the expectation is very clear. The work still has to move. That is the part I care about, because leadership is easy to talk about when the room is calm. It is easy to sound disciplined when nobody is pressing you. It is easy to say, stay focused, communicate clearly, hold people accountable, and make good decisions. Sure. But what happens when the situation is already moving faster than you are? What happens when people are waiting on you and you do not have all the facts? What happens when the pressure hits and the room is basically asking, all right, what are we doing? That is where leadership gets real. And if you have ever been responsible for a shift, a team, a customer issue, a project, or even just a messy handoff, you know the feeling I am talking about. You can feel the room waiting, and you can feel that little pressure in your chest. You can feel the urge to move because standing still feels wrong, and that is where leaders get pulled into trouble. Not because they are bad leaders, not because they do not care, not because they are lazy. A lot of leaders are trying hard. They care about the work. They care about the team. They care about the customer. They want to show they can handle pressure. But pressure changes your pace. It makes every second feel like proof. If you do not move, you feel exposed. If you do move, at least people can see you doing something. And that is the trap. Doing something is not the same as doing the right thing. So you see here, this is where the whole idea starts. A leader walks into pressure. The first visible thing becomes the target. The slow employee, the customer complaint, the missed number, the short staffing, the unfinished work, the loudest voice in the room. And the leader moves on that first visible issue because it feels like control. But what do you think happens if that visible issue is not the real driver? Now, the leader is not solving the problem, they are adding another layer to it. That is why I keep saying, the first fix can become the next failure. And I mean that. Think about a rough afternoon shift. 2 people call out. The morning team leaves work behind. A customer complaint is already sitting there. One employee is frustrated because they feel like they are carrying the whole shift. Another employee is moving slowly because nobody clearly assigned the priority. The district manager wants an update. The team wants direction. That is not one problem. That is a stack. Now, the easy move is to say, we are short-staffed, everybody needs to move faster. Maybe true, but maybe not enough. The easy move is to look at the slow employee and say, that person needs to pick it up. Maybe true. But maybe that person is not the actual problem. Maybe they are waiting on a priority. Maybe the handoff was bad. Maybe they do not know what matters first. Maybe they are trying not to make the wrong move because direction has been unclear all day. So if the leader corrects that person hard, right there, in the pressure, what happens? The work is still behind. The real issue is still active. And now the leader has damaged trust while trying to create control. That is expensive. Not because accountability is bad. Accountability matters. Standards matter. Speed matters. But bad aim creates bad accountability. If you correct the wrong person at the wrong time for the wrong reason, you did not lead. You guessed with authority. And people feel that. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. They tighten up. They stop volunteering information. They protect themselves. They wait to be told. They become less honest about the next issue, because the last visible person got hit first. And that is how pressure spreads. It starts as a customer issue, then it becomes a team issue, then it becomes a trust issue, then it becomes a handoff issue, then the next shift inherits the mess. So the point here is simple. Pressure does not just need energy. Pressure needs sequence. Read first and then decide, then communicate, then assign ownership, then adjust. That is not slow, that is not passive, that is not overthinking, and that is control. And control is what people are looking for when pressure hits. Now let me be clear. I am not telling you to sit there and admire the problem. I am not telling you to freeze. I am not telling you that every situation needs a long meeting, a whiteboard, and some dramatic leadership circle. No. Sometimes you have to move now. But even when you move fast, your movement needs a read behind it. That is where the direct action system comes in. And I want to explain this without making it sound like a classroom lecture, because that is not the point. The point is not to memorize tool names. The point is to have something in your head that keeps pressure from making every decision for you. So think of it this way. CSA is the read. It is the part that helps you ask, what is actually happening here? Not what is loud, not what is annoying, not what showed up first, what is actually happening. That matters because pressure lies to you. It makes the loudest thing feel like the most important thing. It makes the visible issue feel like the root issue. It makes a movement feel like control. And that is not always true. So CSA gives you a way to slow the reaction just enough to improve the read. Then you have ACE. ACE is the decision check. Because under pressure, the first answer usually feels good because it gives you relief. Not because it is the best answer, it is the relief answer. The answer that makes the room stop looking at you for a second. The answer that makes you feel like you are doing something. ACE helps you ask, does this decision actually make sense? Or am I just grabbing the first answer because I do not like the pressure? And that is a hard question. But it is necessary. Then you have PRO. PRO is risk. And I do not mean some giant formal risk report. I mean the real risk leaders carry every day. What can this decision damage if I mishandle it? Can it burn trust? Can it hurt the customer relationship? Can it overload the team? Can it create a compliance issue? Can it break the workflow? Can it make tomorrow harder than today? That is PRO. It reminds you that risk does not disappear just because the leader is busy. Then you have deepen. Deepen is problem navigation. That is where you stop treating every problem like it needs the same response. Some problems need a quick tactical fix. Some problems need the leader to step in now. Some problems need to be delayed because they matter, but they are not the main priority yet. Some problems need redirection. Some problems need a precise move. Some problems need deeper analysis before anyone touches them. So what do you think of that? That is real leadership, and not every problem deserves the same tool. If all you have is push harder, everything becomes a nail. And that is how leaders wear teams down. Then you have TMC. That is tasking and communication. This is where a good decision can still fall apart if the direction is sloppy. Who is doing what? By when? With what authority? What does done look like? What needs to come back to the leader? That sounds basic, but this is where a lot of execution fails. The leader says, somebody handle that. Then later, nobody owns it, and now everyone acts surprised. That is not a team problem. That is a direction problem. Then you have PACE. PACE is the backup plan. Primary and alternate, contingency, emergency. It is not complicated. It just means you do not walk into pressure with one plan and a prayer, because reality does not care how clean your first plan looked. People misunderstand. Equipment fails. Staffing changes. Customers escalate. Leaders above you change direction. A leader with no backup plan is one surprise away from improvising in public, and that is not where you want to be. Then you have brain. Brain helps you think through an option before you commit. What are the benefits? What are the risks? What are the alternatives? What information do I have? What do I still not know? Do I need more time, more support, more authority, or a different condition before I move? That is brain. It keeps you from pretending the first option is the only option. Now I know that may sound like a lot when you hear all the pieces back to back, but under pressure the idea is simple. Read the situation, check the decision, account for risk, navigate the problem, communicate the work, prepare the backup, think through the option, then act, adjust, and learn. That is not bureaucracy. That is leadership discipline. And this is the part I want to be clear about. The promise is not that leadership becomes easy. It does not. I do not care what course somebody takes, what book they read, what framework they learn, or what system they use. Pressure will still show up. People will still call out. Customers will still get frustrated. Handoffs will still fail. Numbers will still slip. Senior leaders will still want answers before the picture is clean. That is real life. The promise is better than easy. The promise is cleaner movement under pressure. That is what I care about. Because cleaner movement changes the room. It changes the way the leader thinks. It changes the way the team receives direction. It changes the quality of the next move. When the leader has a system, they do not have to pretend they have every answer. They do not have to perform confidence. They do not have to overcorrect the first person they see just to prove they are engaged. They can say, here is what we know. Here is what matters first. Here is the risk. Here is the next action. Here is who owns it. Here is what we will do if that does not hold. That is different. That gives people something to move with. And that is what leadership under pressure needs, not a performance, not panic, not blame dressed up as accountability. And it needs a cleaner read, a better next move, and direction people can actually execute. That is where this starts. Not with mastering the whole system today, not with memorizing every tool, not with pretending you will never react under pressure again. Start smaller. Notice the moment. Notice the pressure. Notice the first visible issue. Then ask yourself, is this the real driver, or is this just the thing I can see first? That one question can change the next move. Because if you can catch that moment, you can slow the reaction without stopping the work. You can say, hold on, what is actually driving this? You can say, before I correct that person, do they even own the failure point? You can say, before I update the district manager, do I understand the real picture? You can say, before I push the team harder, do they actually know the priority? So you see here, this is not about being soft. It is not about avoiding accountability. It is not about letting people off the hook. It is about aiming accountability correctly, because bad aim creates damage. Good aim creates clarity. And the difference between those two often starts with the read. A team under pressure needs more than energy. They need clarity. They need to know what matters first. They need to know what can wait. They need to know what risk cannot be ignored. They need to know who owns the next move. They need to know what done looks like. They need to know what happens if the first plan breaks. That is where leadership becomes practical, not inspirational, practical. The leader becomes the point of control, not because they have every answer, because they create enough structure for the team to move without guessing. Go back to that rough shift for a second. It does not need a speech. It does not need panic. It does not need blame dressed up as accountability. It needs a read. What is the condition of the shift? What issue is driving the most friction? What risk matters right now? What decision has to be made before everything else? What direction does the team need in plain language? Who owns the next action? What is the backup if the first move does not hold? What information needs to be carried into the next handoff? That is the practical leadership posture. Not slower, cleaner. Not louder, more accurate. Not perfect, controlled. Controlled matters because pressure spreads when nobody contains it. A staffing problem becomes a service problem. A service problem becomes a customer problem. A customer problem becomes a reputation problem. A reputation problem becomes a team morale problem. You have seen that chain. Retail sees it during peak traffic. Healthcare sees it during handoff breakdowns. Logistics sees it when one mistransfer causes a chain reaction. Hospitality sees it when one service failure becomes a guest recovery issue. Manufacturing sees it when a small process miss becomes rework, downtime, or scrap. Different environments, same pattern. Pressure exposes whether the leader has a system or only habits. And listen, habits matter. Experience matters. Instinct matters. But under pressure, habits can become shortcuts. Shortcuts can become blind spots. Blind spots can become consequences. A system helps you check yourself before the first move becomes the next problem. So here is the practical takeaway. When pressure hits, do not start by asking, how fast can I act? Start here. What do I need to understand so my action lands where it should? Then ask, what problem is actually driving the friction? Then ask, what risk am I carrying if I choose wrong? Then ask, what does the team need from me to execute without guessing? And then ask, what is my backup if this first move does not hold? That is leadership under pressure. Not perfect and not loud, not performative, controlled. So the next time pressure rises, pay attention to your first instinct. Do you want to move because the move is right or because standing still feels uncomfortable? Do you want to correct the first visible person or understand the conditions shaping their performance? Do you want to send the fastest update or the clearest one? Do you want to sound decisive or lead with discipline? That is the leadership lesson. Pressure does not excuse poor sequence. It makes sequence more important. When pressure hits, leadership needs a system. Thanks for listening to the briefing.